So let's start. So about myself, I'm a CTO at Concise, which means I'm a developer, but I'm like a really enthusiastic developer. I like software, and when it's building, I'm reading Hacker News, and I like to be like in the cycle. And the topic is really interesting for me because I've done the whole journey. A long time ago, I was using SVN, and that was the trunk times when you only committed to the trunk, but releases took place once in a half a year or once in a year. And back then, the release was like a really big event, and everyone gathered and was preparing for it for a long time. And then around 10 years ago came Git, and with Git the flows changed. The development flows, and now all of a sudden everyone was using branches, and so I was using branches as well, of course, because that was the thing to do at that time. But then a bit later, like someone asked me, like, why are you using the branches? What benefits are they giving to you? And I was, well, I like to be in control. Version control is not stopping me anymore from doing whatever I want to do. And so I was resisting. I didn't want to go back to the trunk model, but eventually I did, and now I'm really happy that I did, and there is no way for me to go back to the branches. And about this journey I'm going to tell you about today. About Concise. So I work at Concise. We are doing software solutions for growth companies. Means startups and bigger startups as well that are not so starty anymore, but they have the startup mindset. We are 60 engineers. We are a totally flat company. We only have people who can code, and we're not that known in Estonia because most of our revenue comes from export. So we are doing more in Sweden, for example. Here is a map of not where our offices are, but it's a map of where our end users are. So we have millions of active users, and they are from all around the world. And internally we have this concept that we are calling the super agile model, and it's about measuring each teams. We have the concept of product teams, which means that developers are grouped by 3 or up to 7 people, and we measure their score of agility. So we have 11 different ways how to measure it. They are all kind of connected, but today I'm going to talk about the green ones. It's continuous deployment and trunk-based development, which are very tightly coupled as well. But they all make a one goal. It's a neat way how to actually say, because agility is like a buzzword. Everyone is talking, I'm agile, I release every second week, I'm doing sprint. That's not enough. So we actually measure it to say that we are more agile. Yeah. So does anyone know what this is? Yeah, so what is it? Yeah?
GitFlow.
GitFlow, thank you, it's GitFlow. And who is using GitFlow? Yeah, how many of you? Yeah, only one. Why are you here today? I mean, the GitFlow people, you are here today because you want to learn how to do differently. But with GitFlow, the thing is that usually you don't release that often. How often do you release? Do you release once per month? Exactly. That's where GitFlow is excellent. If you want to release once per month, then GitFlow might be okay. But if you want to release more often, then the GitFlow might be maybe stopping you from doing that. And my goal today is to talk about how to not be stopped by all the branching and what you need to do. So first thing I would like you to do is go to this website, menti.com. I will ask you some questions during the presentation. And the first one is, what is the first thing that comes into your mind when you think about trunk-based development? So I will create a word cloud, and I will use it for statistics purposes. So next time I know what you actually think about it before I tell you what it is.
So the code again?
Yeah.
People in the back there are actually seats there here.
It's comfortable in the back, it's all right. I like to be in the back as well. It's about conflicts, that's good. Yeah. Breakage. Yeah. Who wrote the breakage? You did. I will give you a hoodie for the best. Because today I'm here to talk about whites and not about breakage. So I like this one the most. You maybe have the most to learn, or maybe not. Let's see. Thank you. So we have 16 answers. So we have breakage, we have conflicts, but we also have some perfectly fine. That's nice to see. Okay, we have merge. We don't have merge when you're doing trunk, but yeah. So thank you. I will now switch back to the presentation. Well, the picture about GitFlow was like this. The trunk is like this. So the trunk-based development is that you don't create many branches, you only have one big branch, and all your commits can fit into the trunk. That's like the main point of trunk-based development. So you don't have many long-living branches. Like for example, in GitFlow you have like develop branch and then you have the master branch. But in this case you don't, because you really don't need to. And there is an official definition for trunk-based development as well. There is a website, trunkbaseddevelopment.com, that I can semi-recommend. It's somewhat okay, but yeah. So the definition is saying that you don't have the long-living branches, which means that you can still have short branches that live for a short period of time. That is also by definition the trunk-based development, but today we'll compare the two as well. And the trunk in Git world means master. So it's called trunk because, well, you have the trunk, but if you're using Git, then it's master. And now the obvious question is to ask why will anyone use trunk-based development and not, for example, GitFlow? And you really like need to think about why you're doing changes if you're trying to change something. And well, one of the obvious reasons is, of course, because you want to release faster. And because if you have the GitFlow, then like we heard, you release them once a month, but you maybe want to release faster. But then again, why? Why do you want to release faster? And I think there are a couple of reasons why it all makes sense. And one of them is that you probably know the book Lean Startup, that he's explaining the MVP model, that how you are doing rapid prototyping. You figure out the feature that you want to evaluate, and then you create it in as short cycle as possible. You release it to your actual users, and you get some feedback from the users that does it make sense or not. And this has been one of the main reasons of all the innovation that we get from all these startups lately. Because then now you don't have to create one big thing, you can create a lot of small things and then see what works, what not. And for this, I think it makes sense to use master and not, for example, branches, because you really want to get stuff out quicker. The second reason is time to market. That the world is changing quite fastly, and you don't want to be. If you actually develop some code, then you really don't want it to stay in some branch and not release it, and then your users would have to wait because nobody wants to wait. The world is moving so fast, and then release. Like I said, with SVN, when the releases were once a year, then it was a really big event, but it was a lot of stress. And when you release once per month, then it's also probably an event that you don't feel very comfortable with. Maybe you even have to release during the night, and then you have to stay up. And that's not something that you don't have to do it. There are different ways. So it's a release should not be a stress. If a release is stressed, then you probably should change something. And I think the master-based development will help you get out of that stress. And faster development, by that I mean the idea is that you're doing smaller changes now. You're not creating hundreds of commits that are merged into some branch and then release once per month. But now we're talking about really small changes at one time. And then the context that you have to keep in your mind is so much smaller when you're creating the little features, and then it's just easier for you to understand what you need to do and how to do it. And the smaller changes are also better for the actual end users, because the end users usually don't want your whole web page to be completely redone in a month. But if you add new features every day, like every day a user gets a new feature, then that's all right. Say users actually like to learn by small steps, but they don't want the big changes at once. So it all comes back to the trunk thing that you can just get stuff out quickly, but the stuff that goes out is small changes. More reasons why to do smaller changes. Here is a report made by Puppet. It's a provisioning tool, really popular in DevOps community. And what they conducted is that they divided different companies into 3 categories. One of them is high IT performance, medium performance, and then it's low performance. But due to contrast, you cannot see it's low performance. And the difference between these performance is that the high performance, they release multiple times per day. The medium ones release once per week or once per month, and the slow performers, they release not that often. And what they found by doing some statistics on their customers is that if you are the high performer, you release really often, then this one is that if you're doing changes, if you actually commit your code, then you can get it out of production in less than an hour. And this actually results, it gives you like 2 really good things over here. One of them is change failure rate, which means that if you are doing smaller changes and you're releasing them really often, then the failure rate is smaller. If you are releasing more often, then the failure rate is bigger, which basically means that by statistics, the frequent releases are just giving you a better quality products. And also, if you have problems, then they are measuring mean time to recover, which means if you create a problem, then how fast can you actually fix a problem. And if you're a high performer, then you can fix it less than an hour. But if you are medium or slow, then it takes a day. So they actually created some statistics about frequent releases, and I think that's a really good why you should think about the smaller releases. Yeah. Previously I mentioned that there are many different trunks. One of the trunk-based development flow by official definition is the GitHub flow, which means you create all the codes that you're doing, you create a branch for it, and then you create a pull request, and then it gets merged to the master. But the second one, that I prefer that we are doing, is that you only work in master. That means that you don't create any pull requests at all. And I will explain later why it might be a good choice for everyone. And then it's also possible that for some reasons you need to tag your releases. But this is trying, well, in my opinion, it's starting to smell like GitFlow. But by official definition, you are allowed to create some release-specific branches or tags as well. So basically, it's a trunk word. So it's like, are you doing the GitHub flow or you're doing only master? Now let's go back to the Menti. And I'll let you vote on what are you doing. Which one do you prefer?
Prefer or what are you doing?
Yeah?
Prefer or what are you doing?
Prefer.
What do you prefer? It's quite close right now. So we actually have some people who are using master and some who are not using master. And it's really good that we have 11 persons who can listen to me explaining why maybe the master way is a better way. And let's see, in the end you can decide what is like better way. But that is what I will try to explain today. So I will go back. So the short-lived feature branches, it's totally fine flow, I think. It has its own use cases where it's totally okay to use it. And the idea is that you work with pull requests, but you don't have the developed branch, which means you're not doing the GitFlow. You still only have master and then the short-living branches. And the benefits are that all code always gets tech reviewed. It's not an issue because you can get code to master only if it has tech reviewed. It's a really good way for say public repositories. When you think about like Linux repositories, then you have thousands of committers and tens of thousands of commits. Then it makes sense if everyone would put the stuff to master, but you're not familiar with the code base, then it might create problems. And the same basically applies to the model that if you are a big product company and you have different teams and different teams are responsible for different components, then and you're using the internal open source model, which means everyone can commit to every module, then I think it's also fine that if you create a pull request to some code base that is not your primary code base. But there is also one drawback if you're using the GitHub flow. So basically you're pushing your code. Now you create the pull request. Then what do? You wait. You wait for someone for actually tech review it, and then but you don't want to wait. You want to get your stuff out quickly. So what do? Now you annoy someone, and maybe that person is saying, "All right, I will review your stuff right now." Maybe, but maybe not. You never know. So the person starts reviewing, and maybe he sees that, oh, I don't like your code style here, go back and fix it. And then you start from the beginning again, but okay, let's say today that your code was fine, and then you have to send it will be merged and then deployed. And yeah, so we have the wait phase here, and that is what I would like to get rid of. So the master only is really about speed. I mean, you have to think about why do you need to do the tech review after, well, you have to think about why do you need to do the tech review before the merge. I mean, tech review is definitely something that is needed. I'm not saying that don't do tech reviews. Every commit has to be tech reviewed, but I'm saying that it doesn't always have to be before it's actually deployed to production. And there are a couple of good reasons why it is like this. And one of the reasons is you can just get your stuff out more quickly. That's a really good benefit. And But internally at Concise, we also have teams that historically have all the new people that are joining us are saying, oh, we want to do the GitHub flow. And then if I ask, like, why do we want to do the GitHub flow, then one of the reasons is that I need a second opinion on whether I implemented or whether I understood the issue correctly, which means that historically, what you get is a Jira ticket. Jira ticket specifies what you need to do. But I really think that these times are done. You don't get Jira tickets that are specified exactly what you need to do. Then you need to think about how you work at all. The idea is that all the developers should be like product owners. You might have one official product owner that knows exactly what's going on, but all the developers would have the same mindset as a product owner. And then it's not a question if you understood correctly the feature. It's your feature. You came up with a feature, you will develop the feature, and so there is no question of whether you understood correctly or not. And second reason is I'm a junior. Then I'm afraid I don't want to do stuff in master. Well, that's fine. There are cases where you can use branches as well. It's not like you have to do everything in master, but I think most of the stuff should be done in master. Then it's really about how you think about your code. Do you want to be responsible of your code or not? Because if you are relying on someone else take reviewing it before it goes to production, then it's like a shared responsibility. And then you might think, oh, maybe someone even wants to test my feature before it will go to production, but we don't want that. We don't have any QA persons. We don't have any manual steps. We don't have the product owner actually verifying your features. It's the developer who is responsible for everything. And then it all starts to make sense if you don't have these fallbacks. Next one. If you now create a pull request, then someone will take review it next day, but the code base, the master has changed, and then you might have some integration issues if you don't integrate quickly. And this is just an obvious benefit that you get when you work directly in master, that if later someone is reviewing your code, then you can see the actual result, not something that might be or might not be because the code base has changed already. Some people are creating really complicated CI setups that, for example, you have maybe one staging environment, but you create a different environment for all pull requests. That's technically possible to do. There are maybe some reasons why you should do it, but in the end, that is a cost, that is an overhead, that is something that you have to deal with. And I don't think it's really necessary. If you think about the master way, then you don't need all of that. And now some practical things. Like how do you actually develop in the master? Well, one of the really cool features is feature toggles, that you can just turn stuff off. If for some reason you don't want your code to actually work in production for whatever reason, then you can always do something like this. You can say that if it's staging, try my new flow. If it's not staging, try my new flow. And that gives you total flexibility. It doesn't mean that your code has to block the production release. It just means that you have the flexibility. You can do it either way, so it's not a problem. But and you can even make it automatic, which means you can have like admin UI where you can switch on and off different features, and that is fine as well. But if you combine the turning it on and off also with canary releases, then it can be even more powerful. And this is the canary release slide. It basically means that when you are releasing, then you don't have to release all your code to all the users. You can release to, let's say, 10% of the users or 20% of the users. We are mostly using Kubernetes for that, so we can deploy just different versions of applications. But there are many ways how you can actually do it. but it's quite powerful. But here, the most like tricky part is that you need to have the performance feedback. It's little less contrasty, so maybe you can't see all the lines. But the point is that if you deploy 10% of users, then you need to think about is my feature working or not? And if it's working, then I can deploy to more users. But if it's not working, then I will roll back or come up with a fix. For example, Facebook is using this really a lot. They basically don't have any tests at all. All they have is monitoring. So they roll a new version to, let's say, only 1 million persons, and then they will see does it work or not. And if it works, then that's fine. And these are the ways how you can actually guard yourself against the problems. So continuous, we have different continuous ways. We have the continuous integration, we have the continuous delivery, and we have continuous deployment. I have a pipeline. And the pipeline works that you create a Git push, then you run the unit tests and you build maybe a Docker container, and that is your CI part. And now you move to the delivery part, that you're delivering the code to staging, maybe you're running some end-to-end or acceptance tests, and then you deploy to production. Now the difference between continuous deployment and continuous delivery is if the last step is automatic or not. If it's manual, then you have continuous delivery, which means all the commits can be waiting for the production deploy. Your code should be deployable all the time, but it's not automatically deployed to production. You still have the manual step. And continuous deployment is when you don't have the manual step, it will go straight to production. But I would now like to ask you, how many of you are using continuous deployment? Yeah, we have maybe total of 5 hands I can see. How many are using continuous delivery? Oh, so many of you. Can some continuous delivery person tell me why you are manually deploying it to production and not automatically? Does someone want to share experience?
Anyone? Who raised their hands?
Yeah, well, where were the hands of continuous delivery?
In my case, we are kind of an exception because we are not developing backend, we're developing app, so we can't continuously deploy it.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. Thank you. Does someone else want to explain? I'm not only talking about backend, but app development is tricky.
Yeah, in our case, we are pan-Baltic, so we are deployed to 3 different countries at the same time with 5 different languages, and in one region, translations might not be ready yet, so we have to manually check everything before releasing.
And you think there is no other reason why you're not doing it? It's only because you don't have the languages ready.
Yeah, there has to be some manual check from the regions, whether they are ready or not.
Yeah.
In our case.
Yeah, it is perfectly fine reason, I think. Yeah. Does someone else want to tell me why you're not using, why you're not?
So I believe if there is a delay between feature rollout to end users and some testing on staging, without feature toggles, you cannot do the continuous. Continuous deployment. So you need to have the condition for that feature toggles.
So if I understand correctly, then you want to let the code run in staging for some time.
It's not for code to run there, but for stakeholders to check if this feature is accepted or not. Something.
Yes,
like
exactly. Yes. Yeah.
But you don't want to block yourself from merge or commit to master.
Yeah.
So you want to commit it, but it shouldn't be delivered to prod yet. So without feature toggle, you can't have continuous deployment.
Yeah, thank you. But I think you can, because of the reasons that I talked earlier, that you need to be the one who knows the feature. You need to be the one. You need to be the product owner.
Not really, because for example, if you have some new feature and you need to notify different regions, like across the Europe, that we are rolling out this feature. We need to train people, we need to inform them. It means that if I don't have feature toggle and I have continuous deployment, I need to wait with my commit until all administrative alignment will be done, which is crap.
Yeah, but then I think you need some really dynamic feature toggles, because maybe you want to roll code like market by market, not to all markets at once. When one market is ready, then you release it to them, but the code cannot always be in production. So yes, feature toggle basically fixes your issue, right?
Exactly.
Yes, okay, yeah. So you need to just use feature toggles. Yeah. Yeah. Does someone else have a reason why you don't use continuous deployment?
Compliance.
Yeah.
PCI, medical devices and everything.
Yeah, thank you. Well, medical devices is a good example. When you are implementing medical devices, then you have all the CE regulations, and then you have a problem. True. Yeah, there are valid reasons why you cannot do it, but there are a lot of reasons why you actually can do it as well. So it really depends on your use case. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So what I think about continuous delivery, well, it is a really big step towards to the better world than, for example, when you are using when you are not using continuous delivery. When you release only, let's say, once a month, then continuous delivery is a really big step forward. And the usual way how you do continuous delivery is that you actually protect your valuable flows, which means that if you have a customer registration flow, for example, then you protect it by maybe creating some tests. And then if your code is, if you will deliver a code to production, then you know the tests are green, and then that's fine. And that is usually the green light. If a pipeline is green, if it's not the tests are succeeding, then you can deploy. That's fine. But continuous deployment is that if the pipeline is green, then why do you want to wait anyway? So, and in most cases, when I've seen, well, if you're not using medical devices, then I think the biggest reasons usually is that you want to let the code run in staging for some time, and then you want to manually test if it works or not. Maybe it's not you who is testing, maybe it's the product owner. And that is, I think, the powerful way how to think that I want to be the one who is actually responsible of the code. I am the one who did the feature, I know the feature, and I don't have a problem releasing it to production. I don't need any manual testing. Well, I don't like to test manually anything. If I need to test something manually, then I create automatic test for it, and then it's fine. So I would like to ask you now, what percentage of code coverage do you think is needed in order to continuously deploy to production? Sorry? Yeah? So it's 90. So the most popular choices are 90, 0, and 50 or 75. Well, I think you don't need any. That is, it was kind of obvious. It's a correct choice. Well, it's not correct. It's just an opinion in the end. But I think there are a couple of reasons why you don't need any test. I've seen some people who are saying that I'm not comfortable deploying straight to production because I don't have enough coverage. I'm not protected well enough. I think For example, the first one is that I mentioned the Facebook case. Facebook doesn't have tests, but they have monitoring. So you have good monitoring and you don't need the tests. Then the percentage can be 0, but you're still okay. That's totally fine. But the second thing is that if you don't have the monitoring and you don't have the tests, then it's always possible that your app is not important at all. Or if you actually start using continuous deployment, then you will have one of them or both of them. Well, in practice, what happened to our teams was that when you started to actually continuously deploy, then you started to guard yourself. So you actually started creating tests that are the most important. So you protect your critical flows first, and then you protect the ones that are not that critical, but you get like the well-balanced testing that you get to test the things that are actually important to you. So I think right now, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that Facebook doesn't have tests.
Yeah.
It's the first time I hear that.
Yeah.
Do they have no tests at all, or do you only mean they don't have end-to-end tests? Or
Facebook is so big, they probably have everything, but they are quite known that they don't like to write tests, but they invest heavily in monitoring. So I think it's more like a general policy, but there are probably teams that are working on some things that are fully tested, but then some teams are not. But I think the general case that usually they don't write, they don't even invest so heavily in tests, and I think that's totally fine. In some cases, you don't need tests at all, or you just need a little of them.
all right, thank you.
Yeah.
What the case then they don't want to have tests?
Why?
Yeah.
Because they just want to move
What
fast.
features don't need tests?
Yeah. Well, when you just want to move really fast, then you might think that okay, I will skip tests, and that's fine because if you are very rapidly deploying prototypes, then you don't need to test the features because your code base will change. You don't develop a feature and it will stay there forever. You will just incrementally maybe or just rewrite it. So they just do it in a different way. They think that they need some monitoring anyway, and then they don't want to invest in the tests, and that's fine for them. If they deploy something to users and it's not working, then, well, it was only 1 million users. Nothing bad can come out of it. So it's just a way how to maybe, probably they will save some money with it, for example. Yeah. Yeah?
But I think it also depends, when you are sharing a picture and then you receive an error box, something went wrong and your picture gets goes to vaporizes, goes to air. It doesn't matter much. But when you are transferring, for example, 1,000 euros and you receive something went wrong and you don't see 1,000 euros in your account anymore. So it depends on what business transaction is going on. So that will be some cases. That will be some cases where manual testing is 100% critical, and some cases where no testing at all is needed.
Yes, I agree that if it's really important, then probably the tests are not blocking you from doing continuous deployment because you probably already have the tests. If you are making the part that is transferring money, then you probably already have the test, and then they are not keeping you from actually deploying it to production. So it's not the blocking phase at this point. But yes, there are valid reasons why to do it. And if you're developing app, for example, then you probably need even manual testing because you can do it automatically as well, but it's tricky. But with backend, frontend, then it's a bit easier. And in order to actually do continuous deployment, then you need automation. You need the continuous integration. You already probably everyone has continuous integration. You maybe need a staging environment, but also one critical part is you need a rolling deploy, which means if you're deploying a new version of your application, then you don't want the users to actually notice that something is changing. So you don't want to display a 500 error. So your deploy actually has to be rolling. Well, again, we are here using Kubernetes, but there are many ways how you can actually prohibit zero downtime deployments. And then another thing that I really like is some of our teams are using a zero exception policy. That means that let's say you have a Java component and you have some kind of like cloud tool, for example, to get the logs out from the Java component. You might use Splunk or Logly or whatever. You might use Elasticsearch, and you can create an alert out of it. So if you see a word exception in the logs, then you automatically create alert. So it goes to the developers, and by that you will actually reduce the amount of exceptions that you get. And each of the exceptions that you do get, you will explicitly try to find out why do you get the problem, so you can actually fix the problems. And we have had cool stories about when the end users are having some kind of a problem, and then the developer is notified that you have a problem, and then the developer actually writes to the end user that, oh, you had this problem, I will try to fix it in an hour or so, and then the end user will be like, wow, that's a nice quality service that you're providing. And what else should you have is that if you're, for example, doing front-end development, then you need some kind of way how to monitor the user flows. That if usually your users are entering the registering flow, and maybe 50% of them are actually inside your users, but if it suddenly all of a sudden drops to under 10, for example, then you say, okay, I might have a problem right now. So it's in the world of continuous deployment, it is really important that you actually see the problems before the users see the problems. And for that, you have like different techniques how you can do it. And I think it's really important. And I am getting to the end. So basically, my point is that if you're doing trunk-based development, if you're using master, then that is the one that is enabling for you to do the continuous deployment. And continuous deployment, on the other hand, is enabling you to do the best practices of the Agile, where you can do all the cool prototyping ways. And if you don't have a really good reason why you cannot do continuous deployment, then maybe you need to think about the processes. Are you the product owner, or you are not the product owner? Because I think all the developers should be product owners. I really like the topic. So if someone wants to share some experiences with me, you can always drop me an email. I'm willing to explain more about this one. And today, of course, we have some networking, so you can ask me directly. And here are other people as well about using continuous deployment. And if you need a job and you want to do continuous deployment, you are welcome. We need developers. So now Q&A. Is here someone who would consider using continuous deployment after today? Continuous deployment, yes. Yes. Yeah? Yes, there are some hands. Would you, but some who maybe want to use trunk-based development? Yeah, yes. It's the same hands page, yeah? So that's fine, thank you. Yeah. Does anyone have questions? Yeah, you have. And first.
You mentioned about developers being acting as the product owners.
Yeah.
But what happens to testers?
I don't think you need testers. I think you only need developers. The developer needs to be the tester as well. And well, then it's not a problem. So I don't think you need explicit testers. There are some cases where you might need like app development, but usually if you're doing front and back end, then you don't want to rely on someone else saying that is your stuff okay or not. You need to be confident yourself. Thanks. Yeah.
Do you have any testers in your company?
No.
No one.
No. No. Do you? Do you have?
Yeah.
You are a low man.
Yeah.
No one has that.
It's not that I don't like testers, but I think in order to like develop really quickly, then it's there is no time for the tester to take over. It has to be the developer. So if you want to do really quick and small changes, then there is not a possibility that everything will be reviewed. If someone has to test it, then it will slow down your pace, but you probably want to move fast.
Another question.
Yeah.
So basically, if you're not writing tests and you do an incremental rollout and you monitor the result with your actual users using your maybe buggy software, aren't you just using your users as testers?
Yeah, you can say it like this as well. Yeah.
No problems with that so far. Like users are happy.
We are actually writing tests. We like tests. It's Facebook that is not using tests, and it's apparently working fine for them. So I'm open to new ideas. If someone would explain me like really well why you should not write any tests, then I would be really happy about that.
Okay, well, it's reassuring to know that you write tests. I have another question. Is this trunk-based development and continuous deployment something you've introduced recently, or have you been doing this for years?
For years, yeah. It has been quite a journey. I mean, we migrated to continuous delivery maybe 4 years ago, and continuous deployment came maybe a few years ago. But not all of our teams are using continuous deployment. It's something that is like in progress. It's always in progress. There are some teams that are resisting. So, and I think that's totally fine. What we have is like a concept of autonomous teams, which means if you're a team of, let's say, 5 developers, then you have the full power. You can do whatever you want to. You can say you don't like anything what I'm saying here, and that's fine as well. But there are more teams that actually like it, so I think it's fine.
Yeah, regarding testing at Facebook, just FYI, I read from some blog that they often like just release it internally, and I guess they're just big enough and they have enough people that will spot the changes.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Yeah, they have a really good internal user base. Yeah, I had a question.
I just wanted to ask, when our teams are not all using continuous development, does it depend on the team or rather the customer they are working for?
It depends on the team. Yeah.
So customers
love it because they get so great benefits from the time to market. I mean, there is not one customer that is saying, "Oh, I want slower releases." It's like there is like no going back. Once you do some frequent releases, then it's not possible to go back. So if we have customers who have seen the ones, then customer actually wants all the teams to use continuous deployments. But in the end, it's up to the teams. So we really value the autonomy that you can decide what you're using. You can decide your stack, and you can use like how you work, and you can decide everything.
So aside from the CI/CD stuff that you mentioned earlier, about the Kubernetes that you guys mentioned you do, are you using Google Cloud, or are you doing everything yourself from bare metal up to that?
We are using AWS mostly, but we have used Google Cloud as well. It depends. There are valid reasons for you to use the Google Cloud, but I would like to say that the biggest drawback is that if things go south, then Google doesn't have any support, and then you have to wait for days for your cluster to be up again. So that's why we for biggest customers we like to use AWS. But if it was a startup, then of course the Google Cloud is fine.
Thank you for the presentation. It's actually quite cool. I'm a big fan of trunk-based development. We do this at our team, but a couple of comments. All the guys who have tests in the roles should become test engineers, because testing is a mindset. So the challenge is not about testing, the challenge is about making others to test, and these others should be developers. So developers should test however they want to do it, manually or automatically, it doesn't matter. So I think this will be my kind of message, but that's not the question. So the question is actually about trunk-based development. What's your, how do you do this way of, I don't want to say policy, but what's your agreements of removing feature flags? Do you just leave them in, or there is some kind of way where you say, okay, all the code that has been for a month or so should be cleaned up, Or what's your policy on removing and cleaning up the mess that actually is made by the feature flags the more you have in the code?
Actually, we don't have that many feature flags. I mean, we only use feature flags when there is a reason why you cannot deploy it to all the users, because most of the changes can go out without feature flags. So it's only like sometimes, but then if you actually create a feature flags, then yes, you need to get rid of it as well. Usually how you get rid of it is, like if you are doing manual feature flags, that you just hard code it. Then if you actually want to deploy it to production, then you just remove the code and that's automatically removed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
I have a question. Do you have teams that work on individual projects, or some teams could work on the same project? So, curious how it happens that your team decide how to deploy if several teams work on the same product?
Well, it depends on how you define a product. I mean, if you are thinking about like really big products, then it might consist of like hundreds of microservices, and then it's let's say one team is responsible of these 10 microservices, another team is responsible of these 10 different flows, and then what we usually do is that we have some kind of like base level that, let's say, everyone is using Kubernetes, so you have like one way how to deploy. But on top of that, you can like decide how you are making your deployments, how you actually, what kind of languages are you using, and what kind of stack.
Just another question. Do you guys do any AI work, and how do you support AI processing, like from a DevOps standpoint as well? Most of AI work is DevOps to a large extent. You know, I'm scaling up and I'm...
Yeah. We are using DevOps a lot. And well, all our product teams, they consist of developers who are doing DevOps, but we don't have like any specific AI teams, I think. But we have an AI person over here who can maybe explain how is our AI going. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, hello, thank you. Yeah, we haven't been doing AI so far, but we are getting into it slowly. And yeah, I would say the same, that we haven't thought about the specific DevOps for AI. It's probably, it will just depend on the project. So we'll see like what we need to do and then how to set it up. But we have really good DevOps otherwise. So I'm thinking right now, I haven't thought that it might become a huge problem for us. So.
But our DevOps actually means that we have engineers, we only have like developers. And the developer is doing everything. You are responsible of your Kubernetes code and you are responsible of everything. It's not about the operation guys doing something that is not developed by our definition.
Hi. There's one topic that doesn't fit in my small head. So let's imagine the situation. I have a mobile app and gateway backend API.
Yeah.
That communicates to the 50 microservices. And then I also have 50 backend engineers who constantly commit everywhere. How do these feature toggles work? How do you send these feature toggles to, how do you forward them to all the microservices?
Yeah, well, it depends. I mean, usually in the app world, you have something called like backend for frontend in the beginning. So you have some kind of proxy that is proxying the requests to other modules. And then, for example, one way is that you just create feature toggles in that particular BFF. That you, in the first proxy, you can say that, let's say all the users whose ID like divides by 100 get this new feature. And you can have this kind of toggles in the first line of, in the first contact point.
But what if I still have testers?
Yeah.
And these testers, they want, so the first tester wants to turn off 10 feature flags and turn on 20 other feature flags, and then the second tester wants to test a different part, a different feature. How do they all simultaneously work with different...
Yes, I understand. That is a really good question, because that is actually a problem, that if you have different feature flags, then how to test all the different possible combinations. But in my opinion, the thing is that in staging you probably have everything enabled, and in production, if you actually test it on your users, then you should remove the feature flag as quickly as possible. It's not like you need to run some tests a week or a month. Usually you understand it quite quickly if it's working or not, and then you just remove it, and then you just don't create so many different feature flags. It's not like a feature flag world that the only way how to write code is behind the feature flag.
So do I understand correctly that there is no clear, easy way how to...
No, there are so many combinations, there is no easy way. But well, in my opinion, the best way is just to get rid of the feature flags like as quickly as possible.
But I still didn't understand how do these 10 testers test with a cluster of microservices all behind, where all the features are behind feature flags, and how can you...
Test the feature, you mean?
Test the feature, but so that 5 people can test 5 different features simultaneously.
Yeah.
So one uses one uses the one set of feature flags turned on and off, and the other one is using a different one. How does this happen?
If you have a lot of feature flags, of course you can have like a dynamic way how to handle the feature flags, which means you might have some kind of even UI, and then you can say for these users I will turn on these feature flags, and then you can have a system that is sending the requests based on the actual user ID, and then you can have your testers to just turn the feature flags per user, for example. That is possible, but I would not recommend doing it. I mean, in the end you don't want to get the stuff that complicated, but it's possible. You can. That's more like a canary release kind of thing that you can have different versions of code running for different users.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
What were the biggest struggles when you started out? When we are going to do this trunk-based stuff, what are we facing? What is the hard part?
Hard part? There is no hard part, obviously. Well, one of the things is where you probably struggle is like in the beginning you are afraid that you're now doing stuff differently. Stuff will go out to production really quickly, and then you will be like afraid in the beginning. But I think it's not bad. It gets you out of your comfort zone, and then it helps you to move forward. And once you try it actually out sometimes, and well, there has been no going back. We have not seen any team going back. It's not like you start using trunk-based and then you go back to GitFlow. There are no such teams ever in the world. There have not been a single case. Yeah.
But then why people moved from SVN to GitFlow?
I don't know. But the thing with SVN was that we didn't release quickly. If SVN would have been with quicker releases, then maybe no one would have moved to GitFlow. But the problem with SVN was that we didn't release quickly. You released like once a year or so. It was.
You can do the releases quickly with SVN as well.
Yes, you could use SVN. That's fine. Right now, I think that's totally hipster choice.
Actually, I have a question regarding fast integration and code review after. So regarding the fast integration of your feature, you said there are less chances for merge conflicts.
Yeah.
And code review after you did this basically commit.
Yeah.
So the first question is, if you have a lot of developers, like let's say 4, 5 developers who commit constantly to the master. So basically you have the same merge, not a merge, but commit conflicts. They are not gone. So whoever commits first, he's one, and other people need to, resolve the conflict. So you don't get rid of this problem.
You don't get rid of the problem, but it reduces the complexity of it, because the time of your code not being in the master is just smaller. Because at the time when you push, you have to resolve the conflicts yourself, and then you will push it, and the one who will actually take review the commit has already been merged to the master. But in the GitHub flow, the code has not been to the master, so you don't know how the code will actually look in the master.
Okay, and then how to make sure, so you said that we need to do the code review, but after.
Yes.
So basically, it means that we borrow this time when we don't do code review, but commit directly to master.
Yes.
So we don't do this at the beginning, but then later we still need to do. It means that the next feature will be postponed by this time. So it's like we still kind of spend the same time, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so the benefits are not clear. but I really like this idea of time. Because for me, the biggest drawback of this GitFlow is like this waiting time and annoying of other people to do the code review.
Yeah.
So this is the biggest time when we spend in the GitFlow.
But think about the context switching. When you are implementing a feature and it will go to production like right now, and then you can just evaluate yourself, is it working, is it not working, or do whatever you want to do. And other way is that someone will review your code next day, and then it will touch the users. So
how to make sure that this code will be reviewed? Because next feature is coming and people will start to work on it.
Yeah, well, for this there are a couple of ways. Well, for example, if you're using Jira, then you can just see stuff in the tech review column, for example, and then if you will not take the task from the to-do list, you will take the task from the tech review list, and then you can see that I need to tech review first. But if you're not using Jira, then, for example, we are using a lot a tool called Upsource, and Upsource is creating reviews, and then we have dashboard that is saying that you have like one tech review to do. So there are different ways how to do it. But yeah.
Okay, almost convinced. So you said that it's better to work in a small iterations, small features.
Yeah.
But what to do if you have a big feature which cannot be like delivered in small parts? Like you need to deliver the whole thing at once. So how to do in this case?
If you have a valid case,
without a feature toggle. Without a feature toggle.
If you have a, but why don't you want to use feature toggles?
From my experience, it's a hell. It's a road to hell.
It's a road to hell. Yeah.
Yes, we had like this problem.
Yeah.
It's you need to support these feature toggles. You need to support different flows, and we ended up that we wrote tests for feature toggles.
Yeah.
It's actually I don't recommend to use feature toggle like at all costs if you can.
Yes, but
there
that
are
is
always called cases.
But it's like I think there are different cases. I mean, if you really have a task that cannot be split, if you are doing something really big, then the first obvious thing is you should think about how to actually make it in smaller steps. That's like you don't want to have anything that will last for a week or for a month. You want to do it as quickly as possible, and then usually what I've seen is that if you think that this task needs to be in like one big bunch of work of a week time, but usually it's not like this. Then you need to think, maybe I'm doing something wrong, maybe I can split it up into even smaller pieces. And then you might not have the problem, and maybe you don't even need the feature toggles for that.
So one thing that we did in one of my previous companies is we agreed with product manager that you can only have 10 feature toggles.
Yeah.
Which meant that the decision of having or not having a feature toggle went to the product owner, and it becomes like the product owner's problem space. So kind of sharing this load of okay, which is feature flagged, which is not, because feature flags are not really for the developers; they are more for the product, right? In a way, like developers do protect themselves by having feature flags, but at the end of the day, it's the product owner who will then love them. Oh, I can turn on all of those variations. So one way that we did is we kind of limited the product owner to own the maximum number of feature flags. And everything after that, you have to put some of the feature flags live by removing them from the system.
Well, thank you. I think that's a really good way. Well, I don't like the one that the product owner is taking care of it. I think
it's just important to share. And not taking care of it by owning the amount of feature flags.
Yeah. But I really like that you limit your feature flags to 10. I will propose it to our teams as well. I like this idea.
Yeah, thank you. So the question I actually had was outside of the slides you had. So giving a lot of independence for developers is great. Like you're owning the CI, owning your code, taking care of it by monitoring it and actually even probably being on call duty. Where's the red lines? And just to simplify the question, do you also give the full freedom of choice of technology to the developers also?
Yes.
Or you're
Yes.
trying to still... So they can just basically click anything they want?
Yes. Well, in our teams, the team consists, let's say, 5 developers. The 5 developers agree that today we're not writing Java, today we will do a PHP stuff. That's fine, but that will never happen, but it's possible. So yeah, it's really up to the developers to decide on what stacks they use. Well, if you're using, for example, when you're using Java, then you get some benefits, like you maybe have some automatic monitoring that comes with Kubernetes, for example, for all our Java components. But if you're fine with creating your monitoring yourself, then go ahead and use something else. I think we're not limiting it, and so far developers like it, that they feel they are in control. I think that's really powerful. If you get happy developers, that's like the best thing to have.
I'm not sold on the first verse and then review part.
Yeah.
How do are all your pull requests or commits then reviewed from that tech review column in Jira, or only some of them reviewed?
All of them. I mean, all code has to be reviewed. That's not the point. That's we don't let any code not be reviewed at all.
But doesn't this cause an issue where somebody maybe merges or commits something that's not up to the standard, and 5 commits later they already fix it, but now you will go to this tech review column, pick this first ticket, you see that, okay, this code isn't nice, you write the feedback to them,
yeah.
But now you go forward with this tech review, and only then you notice that, oh, he already fixed it.
Yeah. Well, no, actually it's not a problem. I mean, if the code style is not perfect, then I think it's still fine that the code goes to production. I mean, if it's only about code styles, then it's not actually causing problems for the user, so it's not like a big issue. Now, if someone else fixes it, it's possible, but usually when you're doing your really small features, then you don't fix someone else's code style. You just work on the stuff that you need to. And then the good tech review doesn't come like 5 days later, it comes usually within 24 hours. So it comes when someone is free, and that is usually really quickly. So it's not like we create code and then tech review it a month later or 5 days later. We review it when someone is available. But we don't want to stop the train from moving at any point in time.
But do you apply this logic to everybody within the team? I mean, even for the new joiners to the team, or is it only for senior engineers who have been with the code base for 6 months?
We usually have it for the persons who are familiar with the code base. So if you're totally junior, then I think it's totally fine to use some other flow. But in our experience is that when you have a team of, let's say, 5 developers, and then a junior comes on board, then it takes like a month or 2 months that the junior will be like up to the level of the team. So if you have a really supporting team, then the juniors will come up to speed really quickly, and then they will do the same. But in the beginning, it's well up to the team to decide like what they want to do. In my opinion, it's fine if the junior creates branches in the beginning and do the GitHub flow, but in some cases we have the juniors committing to master right away, because we are quite confident that it will not mess up anything, because we have protected ourselves. We have the tests, we have monitoring, and then it's not possible that the junior will mess up something really important. And if the junior actually does mess up something, then we'll just protect ourselves better, and we grow even better.
Okay, is it always that you first merge, or do you actually within the team, senior engineers sometimes still open this pull request more precisely in a situation where you are changing a domain in the code base that you're not maybe so familiar with? Do you, in this case, still figure it out, merge it, or do you, in this case, open pull request and ask maybe for feedback?
Yeah. Usually we don't merge at all because we work in the masters and you don't need to merge anything. You just push it. That's it. But if you are in the territory of some other team's component, then it depends on how familiar you are. For example, some teams might have some core components and everyone is like contributing. And well, in the beginning, maybe you're not that familiar, then you create a pull request, that's fine. But if you start to be more confident, then you can just write straight in master. So it depends on the team. Some teams want you to create pull requests, some don't. Well, our teams usually they don't want to. If you are committing to the repositories and not asking for them to actually develop it, then they believe that you are capable of doing it and they are protected as well. So we like to protect ourselves and then it's not a problem. If you can create a code that messes something up, then you just need to fix problems that you are able to do it.
How do you make developers happy if they need to test their product? They usually do not like it.
Well, it comes with ownership, I think. If you feel like you are owning your product, you are the one who is developing it, and you are the one who can see the benefits, then it's not an issue. You just, when you're just ticket machines, that you get tickets coming in and you implement them, and then they go out and your responsibility ends at when you finish the ticket, then yes, maybe you don't care. And if the release comes in a month, then well, in a month you don't remember what you were developing a month ago, so then you don't want to do it. But if you would start using continuous deployment right now, believe me, also developers will test their stuff because they don't want to break. and then they start protecting, and then in the end you get an environment that is like a really good place to be in. And yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
If I understood correctly, your strategy about commits. If somebody committed the code first, I am committing after him, and I needed to merge my code according to this the first commit.
Yeah.
Ideas. And for example, for any reasons, the first commit will be should be cancelled. But I already committed my code according to the first commit.
Yeah.
So why I should depend from the first commit?
Yes, but why do you want to roll back anyway? I mean, if something was not implemented correctly, then we can just roll back, but we roll back like really infrequently. Usually we roll forward. So we fix a problem and we deploy a new version that takes into account your code and the previous code. So the rolling back is like in case of really big problems and if you cannot figure out really quickly what is the problem. But usually the way to go is just roll forward, because most of the problems that you have, it's totally fine that you figure out the root cause and fix it in like half an hour or an hour, and that's fine. So does it answer your question that rolling forward is maybe the way to go? No?
Actually, no.
No? What would you like to do then?
No, I think I'm dependent from first committer. So my question is, do you know something about solid principle and this dependence inversion?
Yeah. Well,
so but I know this example is like not as straight, but no, really, I don't want to be dependent from somebody else.
But the same thing is both with trunk-based development and GitFlow as well. I mean, in GitFlow as well, if someone else commits before you, then you're dependent on the same code. It doesn't change. You still have the problems either way. If I understand correctly this issue. Does someone else maybe have an idea for this case? Is it the same with, like, say, GitFlow and master, or it's a different case?
Question not about flow, but about postpone code review.
So you mean that if let's say we are using now master-based development and you commit something, it will go to production and then tech review will come.
We're not talking about production, but if somebody just committing his code, if code is committed, so I assume it's good enough to base my work on this code.
Yes.
But if it's not code reviewed yet, but I'm already merged my code according to the first committer, and for any reasons this code is not quality, it should be changed or cancelled out. So
you have to take a risk.
I'm independent from this.
Since you are depending from that previous commit, and let's say this previous commit has
already committed but not approved.
But let's say then you are the reviewer, right? You are reviewing.
I'm dependent not only from first committer, but from his reviewer at all. So I'm independent on two persons already.
From what I understood, you are kind of like reviewing some part of what somebody else already did, and you are, in that case, you kind of have the authority to, I don't know, say that perhaps this is not how it should be done. Perhaps I'm like kind of misunderstanding, but since you are basing your work on somebody else's work, and then nobody has yet reviewed it, you're the first one who sees that. You are kind of like reviewing it, right?
I'm the first who made the conflict. So I need to merge somehow.
I know how to fix it. You don't merge before reviewing.
So my question, if nobody reviewed the first committee yet, what happened with my work?
Totally legit, yes.
Yeah, that's the problem. This is the different mindset. So that's the problem. If somebody committed to the master, meaning that this person takes responsibility and this code is kind of production ready. Otherwise
the test fail and it's not.
Most probably.
So it's good enough, probably.
If your mentality is not ready for that, most probably you shouldn't use it. Like,
I have a comment on that. Like, why do you have developers on the team who are committing the code, which is not good enough? like why? Maybe you should.
Maybe just he is working for some feature what was cancelled by business, for example. It's not question about code quality. Maybe it's question about business requests.
But how code review helps here?
Exactly.
If it's business request, then basically means that you are not product owner enough. You don't understand the product well enough. Maybe that it's appropriate.
No, it could happen actually. Like, okay, you just remove the code and solve.
But code review doesn't happen.
Plenty of reasons.
Let's assume the developer takes the responsibility and does the tests, and the tests he made just pass, but those are not load tests. So when it goes to production, somehow with huge load, it will impact the whole platform. Then what happens?
If it
load testing is not a part. Load testing is not an integrated part of this continuous deployment. So under heavy load, those some nasty joins, etc., starts to like slow down everything.
So if I understand the question correctly, then it's about if you commit something and it will cause a really big problem in production.
Yes.
Yes, and then
because of the huge loads that the developer himself is not able to generate while testing.
Yes. Well, that's totally valid way, but then there are different ways. For example, we are using automatic scaling, and if we get some kind of problem in the code, then we just scale, we just pay for it and then fix the problem. That's like one way how to do it.
It's called the invoice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's like one way how to do. But there are other cases. For example, we have problems. We have had problems with flyway scripts. So it's like if you are doing some SQL migrations, then these can like hammer the database as well. But then you have like different ways how you can guard yourself. So you can have like flyway not run automatically, for example, or you can have it maybe like detect somehow if someone is altering a really big table. That's like the main problem where we had in the beginning. It was because of migrations actually. It was not about that you create new features that is creating load, but we have had cases like this, and then the automatic scaling is really good. So it's one of the Kubernetes.
You have good and nice development teams that can decide everything themselves, but do you have any rules that they cannot restrict? For example, can they decide not to do code review or something else? So any rules that you still have and they are not discussable?
We don't have any like written rules. If you don't want to do code reviews, and if you have a really good reason for that, maybe, I mean, code review is about learning, and usually the developers want to learn. But we actually might have some like rules that developers actually think it's a rule, but not maybe everyone thinks it is a rule. I don't know. But we have not written that you need to do this and this and this. It's not like this. But we are saying, yeah, you need to use like this platform, and you can do everything on top of that. Do you have some rules?
Yes, usually if we have several teams working on the same product, then we should decide on some rules, otherwise it cannot happen.
Yeah, what kind of rules?
Yeah, for example, code review is mandatory, and nobody can decide that they will not do this.
Yes, that's for us as well probably, but it's not a rule, we haven't had a...
We need to explain why it's important, but...
Yeah. Okay, yeah, we probably have this. Then we have one rule as well, probably. But it's. But if there was a team that say we have a really good reasons why not to do code reviews, and it's not like you have to do it. It's just everyone is doing it.
My question: if you are committing directly to trunk, then at what stage are integration tests run? How to make sure that developer haven't forgotten to run tests and then doesn't commit to that code?
We have a pipeline that looks roughly like this. So it means that you know if you're doing the git push, and then we have the CI. The CI is running the unit tests, and it's also running the integration tests. We usually have 3 layers of tests. We have unit tests, and we have like integration tests. So if you're thinking about like in a Spring Boot world, then you have like Spring Boot integration tests. That's what we are running here in the CI. Then we are doing the Docker, we are pushing it to staging, and then on top of staging where we have all the services are running, and in this environment we have the end-to-end tests. And because we only have the master, then we only need like one staging, and that's really good, I think.
How long does this test suite take time?
It totally depends on the component, but we usually want that from the push it goes to production in, let's say, 5 minutes. That would be like awesome. But it depends. We have some legacy components as well. Sending the flow can take like an hour. But all the new things, with the microservices that are coming, then it's usually it takes 5 to 15 minutes. It depends.
When is master unlocked in this case? If I'm making a push and...
It's always unlocked.
But you're running tests on the push?
Yes.
On the hook, I guess?
Yes.
But the hook runs in this case?
Yeah.
If somebody else pushes at the same time?
Yeah.
Now you have race condition basically?
Yeah.
So whose commit is pushed?
It's we have a CI for that, and the CI can detect like which commit comes first. And then the if the CI detects 2 commits at the same time, it will just run them at the same time. If the CI detects 1 commit only, then it will run this one, and then later it can detect the second commit. And then if the first testing ends, then it will start another run. But it's totally up to the CI. You can configure it in a way as you want to. So there really is no race condition. You can just say that every commit gets its own unit tests, and it will be in the order of commits coming to the trunk.
When is the git commands, git push, finished or closed? When is the pipe closed in this schema?
Yeah.
Is the git push pipe open for 5 minutes?
Can you elaborate?
So
what do you mean
if
by
I'm making a git push and git tests are run on top of that,
yes,
is the git push immediately done to the master, or am I waiting for the git hooks to complete?
No, you don't wait. It's a git push. If you like git push in your terminal, then that's it. You don't wait for anything. The CI will get the code from the repository and then run it. It's not synchronous for you as a developer. So for you, it's async.
If two developers do a git push,
yes, one of them has to rebase.
Yeah, the other one no rebases, but the first committers tests are still running.
Yes.
So if now the first committer's test fail,
yes,
this means the other committer's test also will fail, and
yes,
now your trunk is red.
Yes, it's correct. Then we get the alert and we fix it. And if it's important to fix it really quickly, then we will just revert the commit. If it's not, then we usually roll forward. But you get the alert based on you did something wrong. Yeah?
Different approach. Would it be easier to just open a quick pull request, run unit test based on the pull request, and merge on green with rebase?
Well, I will not say it's easier. I mean, you don't have the green pipeline so often that it is a problem, because usually you run it locally as well, and if it's okay, then it's okay. If it's not, you get alert, you fix it immediately, and there is it's not like the pipeline is red for a day. It's just a simpler approach, I would say.
I wanted to expand a bit on what the gentleman in the first row said about the drawback that in master-based development, master contains a mixture of different code quality. Some code hasn't been reviewed, some code has been reviewed. But in this GitHub Flow model, master always has only the reviewed code, and maybe the drawback manifests itself in when the team members start working on new features. They base their decisions and understanding of the code on the state of the master branch, and code quality there could be lower.
Yeah, but think about how much of the code you actually have not been tech reviewed. If I'm saying that the tech review will come in 24 hours, then
sure. Depends on your latency, right?
Yes, it depends on the latency. Basically, we have so little percentage of the code base that has not been tech reviewed that I don't think it's a problem at all. If you have the tech reviews like once quarterly, you have a tech review day or a week, then maybe yeah.
So you mentioned you're growing.
Yes, you want to join?
How many of the how many engineers you're dreaming about? So right now you have 40, 60?
We have 60.
Yeah, so how many you're dreaming about?
I'm dreaming about 600.
600. So what will change? What will change at that point or before that when you have 600 developers doing all of that? So what do you think will have to change or should be somehow tuned? Probably you'll have collisions more, whatever. Like what are you dreaming about or thinking about?
Well, we get rid of most of the conflicts when we migrated from the monolith to the microservices. That was like a big enabler of this. I mean, if you have like a really big thing, then it's much more difficult to actually do the trunk-based development and the continuous deployment. But if you have small services, then you get less conflicts and the impact is always smaller, and then it's much better to do. So I think like the biggest enabler has been already done. What we did was that we actually implemented Kubernetes, and that enabled us for developer teams to actually create more microservices. Before it was, no one was creating them, and then all of a sudden we have so many of them. And so I think we are kind of ready to scale even more.
But everything else stays the same process-wise, technology-wise?
Yeah, to have some.
No, just thinking, trying to understand what do you see in the future might be the risks. I mean, you mentioned that Facebook doesn't do tests.
Yeah.
Like, have you been talking or thinking with other companies who scale fast? What would be the roadblocks and so on? Just that was my intention.
Yeah, well, I am interested. If you are not writing any tests, for example, then I would like to talk to you. And that's a really interesting topic that I have heard from other companies as well. That some companies are not writing tests, and well, we are, but we are interested if it's something cool. Then maybe.
Maybe to explain a little bit is that we don't have our own product, we have customers who have different products. So if we scale, there will be different products. It will not only be the same product we are working on. But even currently, like 11 teams are working on the same product, so it works.
Any more questions?
Quick one. For your microservices, do you have monorepo or separate repos?
Separate repos. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't even have to explain why. It's okay.
Any more?
We had a question in the back, I think. No? 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 All right. No. Instant no. I can take a no.
You can choose the best question and give out one more. Check it.
Oh, yeah, we had some really active ones here. I will. Some will not get check it, but I have one check it. I have two check its. So I'd like to give one check it to the person who asked a question that was not answered so well. I think it was a good question. Thank you.
It's a good reason to start implementing with a
Yeah, yeah. And I think I got most questions from you. Thank you. Yeah. So I think we're done. Thank you.